All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to 4YI4, for your information, the fourth. We will be getting started here in just a couple minutes. Why don't I put on the timing screen here and we'll get started when that runs out. All right, that's time. Hey, everybody, and welcome to For Your Information, the fourth. What's up? My name is Collin. I am the host of For Your Information, as well as its creator. I'm joined by 12 other folks tonight who you're all going to meet here. We have a really fun show for you. I have very little sense of what people are doing their presentations on, despite just running a tech a second ago and ostensibly seeing what people were running their presentations on. So it's going to be as much a surprise for me as it is for you. What do we have going on tonight? For your information is a set of 4-minute presentations by people about like that niche knowledge thing that you maybe like want to talk a lot about at a party, remember parties, but you know, just don't want to seem weird for going into way too much detail about. Well, this is the space to be weird about it. We are going to get really in depth on a bunch of stuff tonight. I'm going to start us off, but then after me, we've got Brian Kelley, Landry Levine, Talia Feldberg, Krista Zammers, Olivia Bryce, Kai Matheson, Kevin Ritter, Pat Dunning, Gabe Palisano, Amy Giacomucci, Dianara Rivera, and closing us out, Rob Barbeau. So that's what our night is looking like here. There is also a secret judge somewhere in the audience. The secret judge is going to give out 2 prizes at the end of the night. What we don't know is what those prizes are going to be for. They could be for funniest presentation. They could be for presentation that reminded me the most of my middle school days. Only I know what the prizes are. So the presenters can't tailor their presentations to the prizes. And then each of our 2 winners will get $10 Venmo'd to them at the end of the show here. I'm going to give everyone, it's called 4YI, it's actually 4 minutes and 15 seconds, your information, just in case there's any tech issues as we go along here. It's really difficult to be a hard ass about that. I'm going to try my best, but it just sucks to kick people off right when they're about to finish the show. And in the spirit of learning, I'm going to try not to be rude about it, but hopefully everyone keeps their presentations under 4 minutes and 15 seconds. I foolishly put myself first here. I did not actually tech my presentation here. Landry, are you here? Are you ready with the clock here?
I am indeed.
Thanks, Landry. All right. Am I ready? Let me turn off my clock here. Oh, that's fun. Great. And I'm going to turn off my video and I am going to share my screen. All right.
Okay, you ready, Collin?
All right. Go for it. A disclaimer. This entire presentation is based almost completely on a 2013 paper in the Journal of Geoscience Education by Robert Ross, Don Dugan-Haas, and Warren Ullman. I owe practically all of this information to them. That said, it is 2020. Why the fuck can't children draw T-Rex correctly? The Tyrannosaurus rex was first described in 1905 by Henry Fairfield Osborn. He and others in this age of early dinosaur research believed that T-Rex was a slow-moving tail dragger, and as such, reconstructed it with its spine angled at about 45 degrees from the ground. You see this in other early T-Rex depictions as well, both illustrations and fossil reconstructions. T-Rex is rendered in a fairly erect posture with 3 points of contact on the ground, 2 legs and a tail in a tripodal stance. The 1970s roll around and the scientific community reassesses T-Rex's posture. Over the course of 2 decades, scientific consensus transforms T-Rex into a relatively lithe and quick runner, with its tail in the air and a spinal angle much closer to 0 degrees. And yet, when prompted to draw a T-Rex, both children and college students illustrated it with an upright back and tail dragging on the ground. There were some exceptions, but for the most part, why do kids today still draw a T-Rex like it's 1920? You might think they're getting it from the movies, but they actually probably aren't. Blockbusters depicting T-Rex like 1993's Jurassic Park and 2005's King Kong tended to show T-Rex with a very low spinal angle, mirroring scientific consensus. It seems like popular films were quick to jump at the chance to recharacterize the slow-moving king of dinosaurs as a fast-moving predator, which is all the more frightening for the viewers. Likewise, popular science books for young people quickly adopted the consensus view of the horizontal T-Rex. And yet, young people still have little sense of what T-Rex's posture was like, despite accurate depictions in both books and movies. Surely a majority of modern children are not gaining their knowledge of the T-Rex from outdated sources like this 1919 National Geographic depiction. To uncover the source, we have to go earlier, not in time, but in the lives of these young people. To Barney, that's right. Many American children first encounter dinosaurs in the form of Barney and his friends, who necessarily take on a highly vertical posture because inside that costume is a human person who probably doesn't want to be clambering around on all fours for hours during a filming session. Another frequent early point of contact for children is toys, many of which adopt a tripodal structure to give them added stability. Not all T-Rex toys are like this, of course, but ones geared towards younger children, like stuffed animals, tend to be more upright and tripodal than their counterparts for older kids. Likewise, clothes frequently feature a cartoonish T-Rex that is in some instances even more upright than Osborne's 1905 depiction. It's possible that for designs featuring T-Rex fossils, the graphic designers used older, out-of-copyright images so that they wouldn't have to pay licensing fees, but in doing so, they inaccurately depicted T-Rex for their young audiences. And so on with even the most inconsequential depictions of T-Rex, in cookie cutters, on greeting cards, even in the infamous dinosaur chicken nuggets. Does it matter? Probably not. There are very few real-world consequences to a poor understanding of the consensus view of T-Rex physiology. But the way that we take in simple but inaccurate knowledge from an early age about how T-Rex stood and moved points towards a pattern of understanding that, when applied to other contexts, becomes more pernicious. What does it mean to be shaped by our earliest, unnuanced conceptions of race, of gender, or ability, or class, or size? Yes, it's possible to unlearn, but why create conditions that require unlearning? Why not learn to face the difficulty of more nuanced characterizations of T-Rex or of people from early on? Because we hold on to our earliest assumptions. We find them stored in our bodies. We measure every subsequent development against them. And that's frightening, maybe more so than any T-Rex. Thanks for watching. Also, sidebar, after doing this presentation, I started getting Instagram ads for dinosaur underwear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Nice.
Right. Get my own video back on here. All right, who do we got next here? Coming up next is Brian Kelley. Brian, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good.
Awesome.
Hey, awesome. Oh, I'm a little in the dark here, but that doesn't really matter because I'm going to be showing slides anyways. Let me get my show right up here. All right, hopefully this works this time. Hey, everybody, that's me. I'm just doing a small presentation, a little bit compilation on the life of Tim Allen and a little bit into his sitcom, 1991 to 1999's Home Improvement. So Tim Allen was originally Tim Dick. He was born in Denver, in Colorado. And he, had like the usual, Midwestern upbringing when suddenly tragedy struck. His dad died in a car accident on the way to a college football game. It was, obviously a very scarring experience, but it kind of shaped his mother's view of the world in that she now had these, young boys to look after on her own. She then later married her high school sweetheart, but she got this sense or this developed, the sensibility that men were like these Neanderthal, this eat and grunt type of stuff that really influenced Allen's early comedy. He took classes in high school, theater, classical music classes, and went to school in Michigan. And in Western Michigan University, he started, doing stuff for the radio program there, for the TV station. And people really took notice of his sense of humor in that, it was very self-deprecating. He wasn't afraid to make men the butt of the joke, to, make a lot of, oh, men always do this or men always do that type of humor. He graduated in 1976. He married his college sweetheart, but around that time he started running in with the wrong crowd. He was a bit of a cocaine user, and in 1978 he got busted at the Kalamazoo airport for trying to score a deal with a cop. While he was awaiting sentencing, he began his first foray into stand-up, but changed his name from Tim Dick, which he got a lot of ridicule for, to Tim Allen. And people noted that, he didn't really curse a whole lot then. And, he kind of managed to be pretty impressively funny without going too blue. He served a sentence of about 3 to 7 years at a correctional facility in Minnesota. And while he was on the inside, he returned to his sort of roots that he did in college, sort of comedic sensibilities. He produced comedy shows. He kind of treated his inmates as sort of his audience. And it was there that he really began to develop a vision for where he would want to take his career forward. After he got out, he moved to Chicago in 1984 and worked at an ad agency doing stand-up where he could. And he found that he got attention from talking about tools when people like from certain tire conventions would come into town, and he would say, "Oh, that tire or that tool," and he would get kind of into the weeds of it. And eventually, these stand-up appearances landed him a taped stand-up special called "Men Are Pigs," produced by Showtime.
Following September, Tim Allen starred in his own cable TV special, Men Are Pigs.
I backed that turbo diesel up that Sears and I bought some too. I got those needle nose, vice gripping monkey mother. Boy, I got 3/4 driving socket pulling ratchet head steel tube and breaker jig, my flat dado head.
As you can see, that he kind of took a little turn for the blue, but execs at Disney saw the special and were impressed. Initially, offered him a sitcom that was kind of based on the movie Turner and Hooch before moving on to his an idea for his own sitcom, kind of based on tools in his life and stuff of that nature. He originally tapped Matt Williams, who would work with Roseanne, and swore that he would never work with a stand-up after the experience that he had with her, because she was difficult back then. But after having dinner with Tim, he agreed to the project. Eventually, they named it Hammer Time, but for obvious reasons, in 1991, they changed it to Home Improvement to make the show more involved about the family.
Following
they initially cast for the role of the wife, Frances Fisher, who was the girlfriend of Clint Eastwood. But they found the chemistry between the two was, so mercurial that they eventually cast Patricia Richardson, who was in the middle of pregnancy while doing the filming for the pilot. And originally, the role of Wilson, the character who was cast for that, didn't know his face would be covered and dropped out a day prior to shooting the pilot. They were put up, because they were underestimated, they were put up against shows like Seinfeld. It performed actually quite impressively. And the show did well as a result. It kind of grew and got into its time slot. Tim Allen achieved the trifecta of the #1 TV show, the #1 movie, The Santa Claus, and the #1 book. They did many special episodes, but were pitched to do an episode about DUIs, which Tim Allen couldn't do because of his own DUI. And eventually, the show, towards the end, people wanted to leave and do their own stuff. Jonathan Taylor Thomas, who achieved success in his own movies, wanted to leave and start college. And they offered Tim Allen $2 million an episode to do per episode. Patricia Richardson pitched that she should make as much, and the execs actually tried to find a way to work around without her. Eventually, Tim got tired of this infighting, and they canceled the show in 1999. That's about it. Cool.
Woohoo!
Woo!
Woo!
Cool.
Thank you, Brian.
Absolutely.
All right, up next, we have my timekeeper. It's Landry Levine.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Sound great.
Okay, perfect. Let's get this screen share going. Okay, thanks for being here today, everyone. The presentation I have for you today is on the topic of the 1969 Students for a Democratic Society National Convention, or how one group of Marxists that was really two groups of Marxists expelled another group of Marxists from the New Left's most iconic group of white college kids, leading to its imminent collapse. So let's get started. Here we go. So for starters, Students for a Democratic Society, SDS, was an overwhelmingly white student group from the 1960s that organized against the war in Vietnam and was inspired by the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement. SDS had around 80,000 members, which makes it the largest leftist group of the era, although the active core was smaller. In 1969, it hosted its 9th national convention at the Chicago Coliseum, which with over 1,000 members in attendance. The stage was set for this promising organization of young radicals to tear itself apart. So what happened? This was because the convention was divided between several hostile factions. The main troublemakers were the Progressive Labor Party, an outside group of older communists that had organized a faction in SDS called the Workers' Student Alliance and had 30 to 40% of the delegates despite being much smaller. They argued that it was workers, not students, who were the revolutionary vanguard. They opposed the National Liberation Front in Vietnam, and they believed that the Black Panther Party were reactionary nationalists. Scrambling to organize a defense against these views, national leaders of SDS organized a faction called the Revolutionary Youth Movement. They believed that students were an important revolutionary force in the US. They were big supporters of the NLF in Vietnam, and they allied with the Black Panther Party. The RYM group was itself a shaky alliance between two other main groupings. One, called the Weathermen, wanted to build a white fighting force, quote unquote, for immediate armed struggle against the US state. The other group, called simply RYM2, focused more on rooting itself in the working class, using workplace and community organizing to build a multiracial communist party. So these were the groups that walked into the Chicago Coliseum on June 18th. The fight started with literally the convention agenda. Delegates shouted down opposing speakers. The Weathermen started chanting Mao, Mao, Mao Zedong and waved copies of the Little Red Book in the air. A speaker from the Black Panther Party attacked PL as counter-revolutionary traitors, another quote. Mark Rudd of the Weathermen moved to adjourn since nothing could really happen. He was voted down. SDS leader Bernadette Dorn, pictured here, from the Weathermen, declared that it was impossible to work in the same organization as PL and walked out with almost half the delegates. The next couple of days proceeded as two separate conventions in the Chicago Coliseum, while RYM debated whether and how to split SDS. On day 4, RYM marched back in, and Dorn declared that SDS members must support national self-determination for Black people in the US, which effectively expelled PL. Both sides went their separate ways to finish the convention, and soon SDS would exist in name only. So what happened next? Well, progressive labor stayed the same as ever, attempting to use the SDS name, but fading from relevance soon after. Though in the mid-'80s, they would have the honor of counting 15-year-old Boots Riley as a member. The Weathermen planned an action in Chicago called the Days of Rage to bring the war home. That October, a whopping 800 people showed up to fight the police. Soon afterward, at a national war council, Weather went underground, carrying out several non-lethal bombings on government buildings and banks over the next several years. The RYM2 faction never successfully united, and over time, many of its members would be involved in forming small, competing communist parties, the family tree of which looks like this. By 1973, all players would be on the defensive, and though they did good work, none of these groups ever regained anywhere near the size of SDS. Sadly, by the end of the next decade, Reagan was in the White House and momentum had shifted considerably to the right, and we still feel the effects of that to this day.
Woo!
Woo, 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 yay!
Yay.
Congratulations, Landry. That was definitely a much shorter presentation than your last one. Much love. All right, we have coming up next. Up next, we have Talia Feldberg. Talia, you here?
Hello, I'm here. Let me share my screen. Okay. Well, are you visible, Collin? Should you be?
I'm gonna keep my screen up so that I can play the clock.
Right. I mean, on the regular one.
Am I visible on the regular one? I think everything looks good on my end here.
Okay, great. All right.
Ready?
Yes, ready. Okay.
Go for it.
All right, hi everyone. So I'm going to tell you about the film Babyface and the birth of the production code. I apologize in advance for talking quickly. There's a lot to talk about. So our story begins in the late 1920s, just as Hollywood is moving into the sound era. The film industry was rocked by a series of dark scandals. Studio executives, fearful of public controversy and potential government intervention, decided they needed to clean up their image. Their solution was a set of self-censorship guidelines, literally co-written by a priest, called the Motion Picture Production Code, also known as the Hays Code after its first administrator. If you haven't heard of it, this is the reason most movies made before the mid-60s are, to quote the system that replaced the code, G-rated. The rules actually weren't enforced for a few years, though, so the period from 1930 to 1934 is known as the pre-code era. Movies made during this time feature things like frank sexuality, mild profanity, mild nudity, drug use, sex work, abortion, intense violence, queer characters, and interracial relationships. All of these were outlawed under the code. Now, maybe less famously, in addition to the list of specific don'ts, The code also included general guidelines that put thematic and narrative constraints on all stories. They decreed that crime and wrongdoing had to be punished, authority had to be respected, and traditional values had to be upheld. Pre-code movies often highlight moral complexity and avert social and political critique. That all changed in 1934. It goes without saying that people still made complex and critical movies, but they had to be very sneaky about it. A movie that perfectly illustrates this shift is 1933's Babyface, a quintessential pre-code and a truly wild ride. It's important for two reasons. One, it was so controversial, it helped provoke the enforcement of the code. And two, when that happened, it was significantly edited to try to conform. The uncensored version was rediscovered in 2004, so we have both, and they are super different. There is, of course, heavy sanitization of sex and violence throughout, but I'm going to focus on a couple of less intuitive, more insidious changes made to the plot. So the main character is the streetwise and independent Lily, played by the great and glorious Barbara Stanwyck. We first meet her in the seedy bar owned by her father, who encourages the patrons who constantly harass and assault her. Her sort of mentor is a German cobbler named Krag, who is constantly telling her to read Nietzsche. Krag tells Lily that she has power and potential because she is young and beautiful and that she should go to the big city to seek opportunity. In the original, and I'm edited slightly for time, he also says, you must use men, not let them use you. Nietzsche says all life, no matter how we idealize it, is nothing more nor less than exploitation. Exploit yourself. Be strong, defiant. Use men to get the things you want. In the censored version, there is no more Nietzsche anywhere in the movie. And Krag tells Lily, but there is a right way and a wrong way. Remember, the price of the wrong way is too great. Don't let people mislead you. Be clean, be strong, defiant, and you will be a success. This change totally reframes what follows. In both films, Lily goes to the city and sleeps, or in the cut version, flirts her way up the corporate ladder until she is rich and successful. The pre-code is about Lily following Krag's advice. It's the story of a disadvantaged woman with a lot of agency who takes advantage of bad systems to achieve a better life. It's also an effective critique of masculinity and capitalism. With the censored speech, the film is now about a little girl who goes to the big city, fails to live up to her friend's counsel, and subsequently falls into moral degradation. This was really driven home by the equally significant changes made to the film's ending. At this point, Lily is married to a bank president, who is the only man she actually loves because he's the only one who actually knows and understands her and her path. When he needs her money to fight an unfair indictment after the bank fails, she refuses and leaves. By the time she relents, he's shot himself. In the ambulance, she's professing her love, and someone points out that her valuables have fallen on the floor. She's like, it doesn't matter. And so, not because of that, but coincidentally, the husband starts to wake up and he smiles at her. The end. The censored version includes an additional scene where bank executives inform us that the couple sacrificed everything for the bank and are in poverty, but they are, quote, working out their happiness together. The original may celebrate Lily choosing love over money in a fairly traditional way, but it's on her own terms, and the future is left ambiguous anyway. Either way, for now, she has her resources, her healthy relationship, and her self-determination. Meanwhile, the post-code ending is tacked on to show Lily and her moral failure being punished. This obviously is not actually from that ending, but she looks sad. And to make clear to the audience that there's no way to keep ill-gotten gains. Luckily, the most accessible version today is the original. There are so many incredible things about this movie I didn't have time to get into, like Lily pouring coffee over this man's hand when he is, assaulting her. So I highly recommend checking it out, as well as other pre-code movies in general. There are a lot of doozies out there. The end.
Geez, Talia, there's a real beefcakey dude there in that one slide. You know what slide I'm talking about?
I do. I have no idea who that man is, and I don't know if anyone does.
Real beefcake. All right, coming up next, we have Krista Zammers. Krista, you around?
I am. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Okay, so if you've ever met me, you know that I'm Latvian and I love to talk about Latvia. So I'm going to present on Latvia's entries to the Eurovision competition. Okie dokie. This ranking is based on, for the most part, my first listening to the song, and also for the most part, the performance at the Eurovision final semifinal. It's also entirely arbitrary and also completely definitive. So first off, Disqualified, unfortunately, is Still Breathing by Samantha Tina, because thanks to our friend the coronavirus, the competition was canceled. But shout out to the woman in the music video doing totally disjointed things like cleaning and also eating moss. At number 20 comes I Hear Your Heart by Cosmos. I don't like this song, oops. I literally can't understand what they're singing, and I also don't understand what the weird robot thing that they're dancing with is. At number 19 is Too Much by Odnis Mednis. This is a classic Latvian Schlager song, which I find relatively annoying. The gist of the song is that his marriage might end after one day because he wanted to drink a beer and his wife wanted coffee. At number 18 is What For by Aisha. Right off the bat, we've got maybe some of the strangest lyrics of the bunch, which is saying a lot. Who is Uncle Joe? Why must he answer these questions? Why can't he speak? Why is God a man? And why does he need an honorific? But the dress is peak 2010. At number 17, Probka by Intars Busulis. This is the only song in Russian. I think it's called Traffic Jam, but honestly, I'm not entirely sure because I don't speak Russian. It's also too shouty, and I don't understand why he's crawling on the ground, and the backup dancers have a hand projected on their dresses. Number 16, we have The War Is Not Over by Baltic Fleet. Wikipedia called it a gentle ballad with somewhat elliptical lyrics, and I thought it was weirdly morbid. There's strange hand motion dance thing, wasn't great either. At number 15, we have the only winner of the competition from Latvia with I Wanna by Marie N. I don't think it's a winner. I also don't really want to sweat in anyone's emotions, whatever that means. At number 14, we have Hello from Mars by Fly. The song is not catchy, but there are better ones. Also, according to the lyrics, heaven is very far away from Earth and has to come all the way down to Earth just to wave at Mars. So I don't know how the directions work in the world of the song. Number 13 is definitely the most confusing song of the bunch with Wolves of the Sea by Pirates of the Sea. No idea why they're pirates. I really don't think Latvia has much piracy in its history. At number 12 is Angel in Disguise by Music, Musique. I don't think it's bad, but these guys have some bangers compared to this one. I also don't know why they included the word tie in it, because according to the dictionary, it's tie is an enclosure, and I don't really know what that means in terms of their lyrics. At number 11 is Beautiful Song by Anne-Marie. She sings about winning Eurovision, but she doesn't get to the finals, but has a really catchy chorus. So it's up to number 11. At number 10 is Triana Park with Line. Minus points for the cultural appropriation, but bonus points for having the most coherent lyrics, but let's be honest, that's not saying much. At number 9, we've got the operatic masterpiece Questa Notte by Bonaparte.lv. This one confuses me because it's written by a Swedish composer, sung in Italian by 6 Latvian men, but the competition was held in Finland, so I'm not really sure what was going on there, but they have great hats. This is the only song that was submitted in Latvian at number 8 with Dziesma par laimi by Fomens and Claims. This song I've heard many times sung drunkenly at parties in Latvia, and shout out to the horrible haircuts. At number 7 is Cake to Bake by Ārzemnieki. I know the woman in the group, she's very nice. They might win the imaginary prize that I made up of strangest lyrics, but they also have some semi-helpful tips on how to bake a cake. At number 6, we have Here We Go by PER. It's a catchy song, but it made it all the way up to number 6 because at the end of the performance, they shouted, "May the Force be with you," and the song has absolutely nothing to do with Star Wars. Number 5, this is where we get to some relatively objectively good songs, and I also think that this is about where Eurovision got worried about copyright infringement, so I couldn't find any of the final performances after 2016 on YouTube. But number 5 is Yosts with Heartbeat. It's got a very saucy music video, and it's also just a good song. At number 4 is My Star by Brainstorm, which is probably by the most famous band in Latvia ever. I know the song in Latvian, but the English lyrics are nonsensical. For example, the Below, but it's still a good song. That Night by the Carousel is our 3rd place winner. I would listen to the song anytime. It's also very catchy, but I also don't know why they consider time travel to be a crime. Our runner-up is Funny Girl by Laura Risotto, mostly for the great dress and the fantastic hair flips during her performance. And our winner is Love Injected by Animata. She is a Black Latvian performer, which is kind of a big deal because Latvia is very white and also kind of racist. But it's a great song any way you slice it. And that's it. If you want to listen to any of these songs, they're all on YouTube instead of listening to me.
Hell yeah. Woo. Woo. Thank you so much, Krista. It's befuddling to me that only one of those songs is actually in Latvian.
I have to agree.
That's so weird. All right, moving right along. Up next, we have my housemate, Olivia Liv Bryce.
Hello. Hi, Collin. It's been fun to hear you from inside of my room while I'm watching these things.
Spooky.
A real hoot. Okay.
You ready?
Yes, I am.
Let's go.
Hi, my name's Olivia. I have been consuming cannabis for about 10 years, and I only recently started learning about CBD. So this is a new experience for all of us. We're going to start with the basics. CBD stands for cannabidiol. It's one of over 100 cannabinoids that works with our own endocannabinoid system. It's often called THC without the high, which I think gives THC a bad rap because it actually does have its own specific therapeutic qualities. CBD is used for a variety of reasons. And honestly, I think its diversity in uses is part of the reason people don't take it seriously, because it's very antithetical to the Western pharmaceutical system. But the real issue is that CBD is federally legal but unregulated. Congress legalized the production of hemp, which is a cannabis plant with 0.3% THC or less. That one's a stumbler. And it left regulation to the FDA, and the FDA has only ever approved one cannabis-derived CBD drug. It's called Epidiolex, and it's made specifically for children living with Dravet syndrome, which is a rare form of epilepsy that does not respond to Western medicine. And the FDA is being a dick about approving everything because cannabis is still a Schedule I drug, and we have, a terrible history with racism and cannabis in the United States. I don't think I need to say that here. So for CBD, the burden is on the consumer to understand what you're consuming, where it comes from, and who made it. And it's really important to do your own research because in 2017, the FDA found that over 70% of products were mislabeled. That either means they're over, under, or completely misstating what's in their bottles. So tonight I'm going to run through quickly sort of like what these buzzwords on the labels are and how to know when it's something you really need to look into. So where your oil is coming from, the plant matter does matter. Hemp seed oil has only protein and no cannabinoids, and it's just the stems and seeds of the plant. Hemp-derived CBD oil is from that 0.3 or less THC plant, and this is where labeling is key. Sometimes products are really clear and it's easy to understand. They've got the whole flower and the CBD. Other times they just use CBD as a buzzword and it's actually just a hemp seed oil. There's also cannabis-derived CBD oil, which is going to exceed that THC limit and is found in recreational or medically legal states. And then there's synthetic CBD oil, which I would not recommend right now because it's really easy to fake. The CBD spectrum refers to the range of cannabinoids present in your product. Full spectrum is going to have everything, including that 0.3 THC. Broad spectrum takes out that THC, often by converting them into isolates for each cannabinoid and then creating their own ratio based on what they want the product to do. The cannabinoids work in something called an entourage effect, which means they work better together than separately, which is often why you're going to be seeing more full spectrum products. CBD comes in many different file forms. You've got smokable flower and vape pens. You've got your edibles and drinkables, tinctures, which is CBD oil mixed with essential oils or adaptogens. And then you have your topicals and your capsules. And right now the industry is kind of regulating themselves, and them and New York State have now made it mandatory to put a certificate of analysis on your website, which is a third-party testing product, which I have been trying to understand these things for like a week and a half and I can't fucking do it. So this is what I am doing instead. I'm having human conversations with the people that I'm buying their CBD from, because if the people who have the best product are going to be so excited to talk to you and want you to have the best experience with CBD and with cannabis. So just pick up the phone and call them and check out these resources. Thank
Woohoo!
That was so cool.
you.
Love that.
I don't think one of tonight's awards is most works cited page, but you win the award for most work. We'll see. We'll see if anyone can challenge you. All right, coming up next, we have Kai Matheson. Kai, around here somewhere?
Hello. Yeah. Oh wait, I forgot to screen share. I'm sorry.
right,
So,
you ready?
hello, I'm Kai, and today I'll be presenting about the math of gerrymandering. I first learned about this when I was a summer fellow at the Metric Geometry and Gerrymandering group at Tufts and MIT. But first, what is gerrymandering? To gerrymander is to basically manipulate the boundaries of a voting district so that one party is obviously going to win it, and it often results in some weird shapes. This term came about when a governor named Elbridge Gerry proposed a plan shaped like a salamander. And so Gerry, salamander, gerrymander, and so it was named. A classic example of a gerrymander is this one district in Pennsylvania that people like to call Goofy Kicking Donald Duck. To put it simply, gerrymandering is just bad. It decreases the power of a vote by either packing, by putting people of a certain party into one district, or cracking, putting them all into different districts where their votes will have no power. Whether packing or cracking, the outcome is the same. Their votes won't matter, and the electoral outcomes will be disproportionate to the population. So what I'm telling you about today is how to detect a gerrymander. But first, an introduction to statistical significance. Imagine you have a coin flip. You have a coin and you flip it 100 times. You'd expect around 50 heads and 50 tails, right? But you probably wouldn't get exactly that. You might get 43 heads and 57 tails. Like, okay, no odd feeling here, just a normal coin. But let's say you get 10 heads and 90 tails. That seems very unlikely. If the coin is truly an unbiased coin, which is the hypothesis that we're trying to assess. If you get 1 tails and 99 heads, you can almost be absolutely sure that this coin flip game is rigged. So what's the point of this? Basically, you have to have an idea of what's normal before you can evaluate what's abnormal. Knowing a normal coin should flip around 50-50 heads should make alarm bells go off in your head when instead you get this crazy outlier of 99 heads and 1 tails. So we want to do the same thing, but with gerrymandering. So imagine that you have 2 political parties, the clubs and the hearts, and they're spatially distributed as pictured on this 4x4 grid of neighborhoods. Then you can imagine a universe of randomly generated districting plans that are not gerrymandered at all. For example, the ones shown on the top of this graph that's called a metagraph. We can use these plans to then compare the actual proposed districting plan to in order to assess whether it is biased, just like we did with the coin flips. But wait, how to generate these plans? We need to use something called a random walk. Imagine an ant walking around aimlessly. This is a GIF of what that might look like. But now, instead of an ant, this time it's the borders of voting districts randomly changing. This helps us create a distribution of non-gerrymandered plans by which to compare the real plan to. This is an example of one such distribution where most of the plans result in the Heart Party winning 1 to 3 seats. If the real plan is too much of an outlier, for example, if it's one of the 9 possibilities where the Hearts win 4 seats, then we can more definitively reject the hypothesis that it was gerrymandered, thus detecting a gerrymander using the power of statistical significance. If you're interested in learning more, the keywords to know are Markov chain Monte Carlo methods. I would also direct you to this fun little interactive site. Thank you.
Thanks. Woo. Coming up next, we have Kevin Ritter. Kevin, you around?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Yeah.
Great. So I need to do the thingy. Great. Can you see my screen now?
Your screen.
Great. Okay. So here we go. So hello, I'm here to talk about a 1926 Supreme Court case called Euclid v. Ambler. It's where we got the concept of Euclidean zoning in the United States, which allows municipalities to create zoning restrictions like allowing only single family homes with like 3-acre lots or other similar restrictions. It's essentially a question of what buildings can go where, how tall buildings can be, what they can be used for, all that sort of stuff. It can do things like stop a large factory from being built next to an elementary school, or stop a skyscraper from being built next to a strawberry farm or something. The case we're looking at took place in Euclid, Ohio in the 1920s. Euclid is an inner ring suburb in Cleveland, which in the 1920s was a bustling city, largely due to its steel mills. Euclid at this time was a fairly affluent suburb, and in the 1920s, it was home to what was called Millionaires Row along Euclid Avenue. In this time period, the residents of Millionaires Row caught wind that a man named Ambler had purchased a large lot across the street from their houses and planned to build a factory there. The residents of Millionaires Row were predictably perturbed by this potential factory for obvious reasons. They thought like the fumes could make people sick, but perhaps more importantly, they were worried that their property values could plummet. So they implemented zoning that privileged single-family homes above all others, and they zoned Ambler's property to not allow a factory to be built on that lot. And that's essentially what Euclidean zoning is, zoning that privileges detached single-family homes. So Mr. Ambler decided to take this to the courts, and the case worked its way up between 1922 to the Supreme Court in 1926. Ambler claimed that he should be able to put whatever he wanted on his land, and that to restrict what he could put there represented a taking. And so it was here at the Supreme Court that things got kind of really interesting, because although the original case hinged primarily on putting factories near houses, much of the discussion in the Supreme Court case surrounded another threat, that of the apartment building. There was concern that apartment buildings would loom over single-family homes, depriving them of light and air. The Supreme Court decision even calls apartment houses a mere parasite, like they're somehow leaching resources off of precious low-rise neighborhoods and polluting them. But as you may have thought about already, conversations about what buildings are permissible are often like a stand-in for what kinds of people should be able to inhabit spaces. As much as the inhabitants of Millionaires Row were concerned about factories' pollution and the potential for increased traffic into the neighborhood, they were also concerned about the factory bringing in the kinds of people who labor in factories, namely Black workers and Eastern European workers who would cross the Cleveland-Euclid border and invade their neighborhood. Apartment buildings, too, represented a threat to the affluent white suburban family homeowners. If poor apartment dwellers could come into the neighborhood, what would that mean for them? Would there be more crime? Would it ruin the neighborhood? So exclusionary zoning is as much about excluding people as it is about preventing certain buildings from being built in a neighborhood. Recently, some cities like Minneapolis and Seattle are contending with single-family zoning's racist history and considering ending such restrictions in an effort to create more equitable and affordable housing. There's some potential problems with how this is being implemented, but I've got like seconds left, so we're not gonna go into that. So thank you for coming to my little chat about this Supreme Court case and basically how one wealthy community in suburban Ohio in the 1920s set the stage for a century of discriminatory housing and urban planning policies throughout the country. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Woo! Woo! If anyone who is here is watching, wants to get involved, we are trying to do these, I think, every month, more or less now. This is the fourth one we've done. We did one last month, and then the previous one was in person back at the Tank Theater in Manhattan. I think it was back in February, I want to say. And then the previous one before that was like back in May 2019. But we're trying to make them a more regular thing, especially because it's so easy to do that online here. So if anyone is interested in getting involved in that, I will put up my email address in a second. It's Collin, C-O-L-L-I-N, @thethanknyc.org. I'll put that up again in a few minutes. Up next, we have Pat Dunning here. Pat, are you around?
Hello, I'm here.
Hey, Pat.
All right, share screen, share computer sound. Yes. All right, we see this, we all good? You hear me fine?
Hear you fine.
You're good.
you're in the thing now. Great, you ready? Go for it.
Okay. So last week ended with the passing of legendary screen actress Olivia de Havilland. May she rest in peace. She died at 104 years old, one of the surviving actors from that Hollywood golden age, you know, the age of studio systems, the Hays Code, thank you Talia for telling us about that, etc. Now, I'll admit that the only film of hers I am really familiar with is The Years of Robin Hood, a 1938 film with her as Maid Marian and Errol Flynn as Robin Hood. I grew up watching this film a lot with my dad. It's a lovely, colorful classic with lots of sword fights, evil battles, and now archery special effects in this film have a very interesting story behind them, or rather, a very interesting man behind them, an archer named Howard Hill. Howard Hill was an archer, hunter, athlete, an outdoorsman from Alabama, then Florida, then California. He did a lot of work in Hollywood because of his renown as a competitive archer and a trick shot master in his own right, and a skilled consultant and stunt coordinator for some studio films of the time. He was and still is regarded by many as the greatest professional archer of the 20th century, at least in the United States. In 1928, by the age of 29, he had won 129 archery competitions in a row. And by mid-1930s, Howard Hill was making a name for himself working behind the scenes of the silver screen and sometimes going in front of the camera to shoot arrows into swinging light bulbs, shooting bullseye targets by aiming with a bow on.
Girls, meet Howard Hill, the modern world's most famous archer.
Did all of the stunt archery work for the Adventures of Robin Hood. It was not Errol Flynn shooting any real arrows, but Howard Hill. Howard has cameos on screen 4 different times in the film, shooting arrows as 2 distinctly different characters who happen to be wearing the same costume. And his arrows fly from off camera many more times in the film. The more cool and impressive feat, however, is this Robin Hood movie's stunt work with live actors. In 1938, Howard Hill performed the task of shooting sharp arrows not only into the targets, but into live actors for the sake of getting the most realistic arrow shot.
Continue!
Each of those shots was a real arrow fired at real speed by Howard into a precisely placed piece of balsa wood worn underneath the costumes of each of these actors, along with some other padding. It's filming Robin Hood. This Robin Hood film had a record for the most stuntmen employed on any one film production, and each of those men shot with arrows was paid $150 each time they had to be shot. That's about $2,677 by today's standards. Maybe not worth it to get a real arrow shot at your torso, even by a professional. I don't know if it's worth it, but Howard Hill was the best, and those actors trusted the hell out of him.
I'll lay this out top of the heels when I get back.
Thank you.
Very nice. Very, very nice.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'd like to get paid $150. That sounds great.
That sounds lovely.
I think so. We after our last presentation here, I'm sure our secret judge will need a second to figure out who are the prize winners. So if anyone in the audience right now has any questions for any of the presenters, feel free to throw them in the YouTube chat there. Or if any of the presenters have questions for each other, we'll have a point at the end after Rob's presentation at the end to do a quick Q&A there before our judge decides. All right, up next we have Gabe Palisano. Gabe, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right, let me just share screen. One sec. All right, can you see it?
Looks good.
All right. Hi, everybody. So today I'm going to be talking about the 1904 Baltic Fleet. This all takes place during the Russo-Japanese War, which was an early 20th century conflict between Russia and Japan. It's really only historically significant because it was the beginning of the end for the Russian Empire. It demonstrated that the regime was a total social, civic, economic, and political failure. Also, it was a shock to Europe's ego, which had quite racistly been laboring under the assumption that only they could inflict colonial atrocities on other countries, when in reality, Japan was pretty good at it too. But I'm not going to be talking about the conflict at all. I'm going to be talking about the journey that the Baltic Fleet took to the Bay of Tsushima. If you look at this map, you can see that Tsushima is located here and the Baltic Fleet was anchored here. Now, a fun fact about boats back then is that they were totally incapable of overland travel, which means the route to Tsushima was, well, it was very, very long. But when the Tsar tells you you have to go die in an imperial war designed to distract from impending social collapse, you've got to answer the call. So the fleet departs in May of 1904, or actually they're going to depart in May of 1904. But while they're waiting in the harbor, the battleship Knyaz Suvorov accidentally fires on and sinks the battleship Oriole. So they have to wait until October to depart. About a week and a half into the trip, they're in the North Sea when they come across 3 British fishing trawlers. And they make the same assumption that anyone would when you come across 3 small boats off the coast of England in the early morning, that they're being attacked by the Japanese. So what happens next is the 30-minute sustained bombardment during which the Baltic Fleet sinks all 3 vessels, and just to be absolutely certain, 2 of their own. So obviously Great Britain is very, very upset. They're about to declare war on Russia. Mercifully, diplomacy saves the day, and Russia is able to prevent the Russo-Japanese War from becoming the Russo-Anglo-Japanese War by dumping a literal boatload of money into Britain's lap. But that's not the end of it, because like I said, Britain is still very upset. If you return to this map of the proposed route to Tsushima, you'll see there are a few bottlenecks here, here, and here. These are respectively the Strait of Gibraltar, the Suez Canal, and the Gate of Tears, all of which, incidentally, are owned by Britain at the time. Hoping to spare the world's fishermen a second incident, Britain bans the Baltic Fleet from passing through any of them. So now the road to Tsushima looks a little bit more like this. At Gabon, the Baltic Fleet almost makes the Russo-Anglo-Japanese War the Russo-Anglo-Franco-Japanese War by sailing directly into a French port to demand coal under threat of bombardment. This desperation was caused by the fact that they had missed an opportunity to resupply at Dakar because during a training exercise, one of their boats had crashed into the fuel depot and set it on fire. Speaking of training exercises, the Baltic Fleet engages in several of them along the Horn of Africa, which really only succeed in exhausting their supply of ammunition when it's discovered that the battleship Oriole had never been restocked when it sank back in May. The Russian Admiralty had sent a supply vessel after them with the missing ammunition and also an experimental submarine, but the Baltic Fleet had misidentified it as a Japanese sneak attack and blown it out of the water when it caught up with them near Spain. The Oriole running dry is almost a non-issue though, because during target practice, it is hit by friendly fire and it sinks yet again. So the Baltic Fleet has to anchor at Madagascar and await reinforcements. And what happens next is what you might expect to happen if you took a bunch of people who had never been to the tropics, ruined them there over the summer, and made them wait in tiny metal boxes on the water. Malaria, a lot of malaria. So a bunch of people end up dying, and the Baltic Fleet does what any self-respecting navy would do. They hold a funeral at sea. And like any self-respecting navy holding a funeral at sea, they accompany it with a 21-gun salute. What only the Baltic Fleet would do, though, is accidentally use live ammunition for the 21-gun salute. In the ensuing carnage, 2 ships have been hit, the Aurora and, you guessed it, the Oriole. So if you think this all sounds very ridiculous, well, so did the crew of the Oriole, because they mounted an attempted mutiny about 2 weeks later outside Vietnam. And if you think that sounds very reasonable, well, so did the rest of the Baltic Fleet, because there were 3 more mutinies the next day. To bring this all to a close, the Baltic Fleet finally arrives in Tsushima in May of 1905 after 8 months of journey. And there they are met by the entire Japanese Navy, and the whole Baltic Fleet is sunk in one of the worst disasters in modern naval history. But if it's any consolation, the battleship Oriole finds a new home in the Japanese Navy, where it's renamed the Iwami, and it serves for 17 years without ever having to sink again. Thank you.
Woohoo!
Wow. My goodness.
Sorry, I'm eating bread, but wow, war is hell. Thanks, Gabe.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Jeez Louise. You can hear my housemates laughing in the background here. Up next, we have Amy Giacomucci. Amy, are you around?
Hello, yes, I am here. All right, one moment, and I will share my screen to the correct page. All right, hi, my name is Amy Giacomucci, and welcome to What to Do If I Have Theories, Reddit advice through the lens of the American Dream narrative. The structure of the Reddit advice posts I'm discussing today, most commonly found on the Am I the Asshole and Relationships subreddits, is distilled to its essentials with the titular post of this presentation. What to do if I have theories? I contacted a college and they ignored me. In this talk, I will break down a similar Reddit advice post titled, Am I the Asshole for Trying to Sell My Sandwich to Various Delis in My Town? Into 3 parts using What to Do If I Have Theories and the American Dream narrative as a guideline. Go to the next slide. There we go. Before moving on, I want to note that this genre is not limited to Theories Guy and Sandwich Guy, and also includes Ketchup Guy and, very recently, Soup Tubes Guy, both featured in excerpt on this slide. With that said, what is the American Dream? The American Dream was described by James Trislow Adams in 1931 as that dream of a land in which life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone, with opportunity for each according to ability or achievement, in which all shall be able to attain the fullest stature of which they are innately capable. However, the most popular American Dream stories are deconstructions of this premise, with examples including The Great Gatsby, The Jungle, and The Grapes of Wrath. In these novels, protagonists encounter a catalyst to make a major change that should improve their life for the better, usually to achieve property, security, and dignity. They pursue that change with all of their resources and subsequently undergo significant hardships because of the implicit promise of reward. Then, when all resources are squandered in single-minded pursuit of this dream, they face denial and ruin when they find that what they were promised was never truly within their reach. Let's begin our analysis. First, what to do if I have theories, the promise and the catalyst. The theory is the dream of a better life gained by one's own merit, represented by the brilliant idea that will bring the creator their deserved fortune. Sandwich Guy had an idea for a very delicious and innovative sandwich recipe that they wanted to patent and pitch to business owners in exchange for $50 and 20% royalties on all sandwiches sold, which they were sure would bring them an additional income stream and commercial success. This serves as the catalyst and the promise, which leads to I contacted a college, the pursuit and the hardship. At this point, the protagonists invest their time, resources, and health in pursuit of their promised reward. The Jungle's Jurgis Rudkis immigrates and works in an exploitative factory in an attempt to create a safer and more stable life for his family. The Jodes of The Grapes of Wrath set out for California to attain land, dignity, and a future. Sandwich Guy contacts 11 deli managers to share their idea with them. But they ignored me. This is the denial of the dream. In The Jungle, Jurgen Rudkis' life is only able to improve when he joins a socialist labor strike against the very institutions in which he had placed his faith. The Jodes reach their final goal after months of hardship, only to find that the land of plenty is designed to exploit them and keep them in poverty and danger for the sake of corporate farmers. Sandwich Guy is unable to find a deli manager willing to accept their terms for sharing their sandwich recipe, and in continuing their single-minded pursuit of this goal, loses friends, opportunities, and emotional stability. They are unwilling to let go of the promise that if they just keep working, they will sell their sandwich and be paid handsomely for all their hardship. Through the biases of high school literature tracks, we know innately how American Dream stories end. Sandwich Guy, Theories Guy, and their cohort are the same story on a smaller scale, and I posit that this allows us an unearned sense of closure on these posts, which creates the illusion of a satisfying ending. I end my presentation with what this presentation could have been in a different world. I cede the rest of my time. How do I stop? I don't know how to stop screen sharing.
I gotcha.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Amy. I love those posts so much. Cool beans. We got 2 more folks. Up next, we have Dianara Rivera. Are you here? Hey.
Oh, I'm muted. Hi, I'm here. All right, let me just share my screen. All right. So I start. Okay. I'm going to tell you a little bit about figure skating, specifically around the 2018 Winter Olympics scoring men's singles figure skating. So around 2018, I was pretty obsessed with figure skating, and I literally knew nothing about it. But then I met someone who had taken figure skating lessons when she was a kid, and she taught me a little bit about how it all works, like how the scoring works, what the different elements are. So I am going to share a little bit about what I learned with you today. So you've probably seen some of these people. These are generally like pretty big people. That's Yuzuru Hanyu. These are some other people from other teams, including Nathan Chen, who you've probably heard of because he was a big deal around the 2018 Winter Olympics. So this is Yuzuru Hanyu, who I'm going to use as our example for today. So he was the winner of the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. He's Team Japan. He's considered the best in the industry in technical and artistry skills. And then like a fun fact about him is that he really loves his little poo stuffed animal thing. It's like a tissue holder and he has it as a good luck charm. So fans throw poos at him after he performs and it's kind of great. So anyways, what I wanted to do is like kind of break down what the scores are. So this is an example of a score sheet. So you can see the technical score, component score, and deductions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what makes up those scores. So it's called the total segment score, the score that you see when they sit down on the bench, and it's made up of the technical element score, TES, and the program component score, PCS. So basically the technical element score is technicality. So that's the stuff that they do, the jumps, the spins, etc. The PCS is artistry, and we're not going to talk about that very much because I don't have time to get into that, but I will break down a little bit what TCS is. So TCS, as I mentioned before, is based off of the elements of the program. Each element has a base value, and you can see in the green box, those are the elements: jump, spin, spirals, connecting elements. So they each have a base element, and then it's adjusted for grade of execution, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So this is Yuzuru Hanyu's score sheet for his winning performance at the 2018 Olympics. So I circled some of the elements, so I'll show you a little bit about what some of the things on this score sheet means. So the way that you tell apart the elements, and specifically the jumps, is there are edges. It has to do with the edges on a skater's boot. The edges of the blades on the bottom of their boots, they will take off on either the inside edge or the outside edge, and then land on the inside or outside edge, either on the same foot or the opposite foot. And then that's how you can tell apart the different jumps. So these are just kind of like GIFs of some of the jumps. The one that's easiest to tell is the axle because it's the only one where they jump forward into the air. Some of them, they use the toe pick, as you can see in some of the GIFs, they'll use the toe pick assist. Some of them, they just go straight up into the air. So yeah, these are the different types of jumps. And on a score sheet, you might see a number followed by the abbreviation. So for example, the one that I put on here, 4S, that stands for quad salchow. So the way that you can tell a quad salchow is that you can use those things that I showed you there, like which edge of the blade they come off of and they land on, and also how many rotations they do in the air. And then that has a base value. But then the base value, there can be points deducted from the base value, depending on like these things I list here. For example, if they jump from the wrong edge of their skating blade, then it's not the right jump that they said that in the program they submitted to the judges. So then they get points taken off. If they under rotate the jump, they get points taken off. If they pop a jump, so that's when the skaters, it kind of looks like their legs are an L in the air and they don't do as many rotations as they said they would, they get points taken off. Also for grade of execution, so this is how well they do it. Each judge awards this separately. As you see, it's -5 to +5 scale. And this adds or subtracts from the base value of the jump, which is already adjusted based on all these things I said if they misperform the jump. So real quick, I'm just gonna go back to the score sheet that I showed you at the beginning. So you can see GOE, which is an average of all the GOEs that the judges, Judge 1, Judge 2, Judge 3, etc., showed. You can see the executed elements, which is what I was telling you before. I showed you some of the jumps. You can see their base value. And then you can see at the bottom, their program components, which is the artistry part of it, which I didn't talk much about, but you can see kind of like what goes into that as well. So yeah, that's all. That's kind of like a crash course on how you can look at scores in men's figure skating. Thanks.
Woo! Thanks so much. I realize I don't know anything about figure skating. And now I know slightly more about figure skating. We are on our last presenter now. It's Rob Barbeau. Rob, are you here?
Yep, here.
All right.
Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, yep.
All right.
And then after this, if anyone has any questions for any of the presenters, or if the presenters have any questions amongst themselves, we'll do a quick question time while our secret judge decides the secret prizes. All right.
All right, everything looks good?
Looks good. You ready?
Yep.
Let's go.
All right. So my name is Robert Barbeau of Beautiful Beard Grain Farm, and I'm going to be talking about how to grow grains at home in your own garden. All right, so you want to grow grains in your garden. I can assure you they will fit in your garden. I've got one reason for that. There's 100 seeds will almost always do better than one. It goes back to that previous presentation we saw on the coin flipping thing and the gerrymandering. 100 seeds are going to yield more than one seed. Then we'll talk about how to manage 1,000 plants and how you process a million seeds. So I've got to say, whatever you want in your pantry, work backwards from there. The end use determines what you plant. For example, I want to grow a 5-gallon batch of beer, so I planted barley. Well, now if you've grown anything else in your garden, I can assure you grain will grow well. The only things you have to do are a little bit of research on the seed rate and the seed date. That is how many seeds you plant per square foot and when you plant them. Don't repeat my first year mistake of planting 16 times too much seed 1 month too late. Instead, pre-weigh the right amount of seed and then spread it by broadcasting the seeds. You can even go seed by seed in rows if you really want to take care and do it.
Rob, are you there? Uh-oh. Sorry about this, everyone. Rob, you're... Ooh. And we did just lose Rob there. All right, give it a second, see if he pops back in. Again, if anyone is interested in submitting work for the next 4YI, I don't know when it's going to be yet, but my email is Collin, C-O-L-L-I-N, @thetanknyc.org. So feel free to email me later, and I will get you on the list for the August one. Where's Rob? While we're waiting here, do any of our presenters or anybody on YouTube have any questions for any of the presenters? Молодец, молодцы. Let me just check in with our secret judge here to see how the prizes are looking. Be right back. All right, the secret judge has almost decided on the prizes here. Brian says in the comments, this audience is too rowdy. You are, but you've been a wonderful audience, and I appreciate you all being with us this evening. I was chatting with somebody. I mentioned in my presentation that I got that Instagram ad for the dinosaur underwear after doing the research for my presentation. And then I was telling my colleagues at work this earlier today. I showed them the Instagram ad through my phone screen through Zoom. And then subsequently, one of my coworkers also started getting me undies ads for dinosaur underwear, which is, it's disquieting. I don't like it. Any word from Rob? No word from Rob on my end. Well, I think the grain may have gotten Rob. All right, well, I guess assuming Rob does not come back here, our secret judge does have some deliberations. Tonight's secret judge was none other than my housemate, Mike Fracentese. Mike's over here. Mike, do you want to come join me over here?
I'll come join you over here. Hello. Hey, folks. Pleased to be here at 4YI on Collin's frankly terrible webcam.
It's not that bad.
It's not great. So how do we do this?
So you decided beforehand what the two awards were without seeing or knowing really anything about the presentations you were going to be getting. So what were our two awards?
That is correct, Collin. So in the spirit of being a mystery judge, I decided to pick two categories that I think really spoke to who I am as a person. And so I was really looking for two winning categories here. One was which presentation is the horniest, and the other being which is the most poetic.
So you. That's so you. So who do you want to announce?
Yes. So the winner for I think the horniest presentation, and this is just really based on the subject matter alone, I would have to give it to Talia's presentation about babyface and pre-code filmmaking.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Pre-code films, pretty horny. And then for most poetic was a really tough one. I really set myself up for a hard decision there.
Really set yourself up as if someone was going to do the presentation you would have done.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I think for me, a big part of poetry is repetition. So I ended up picking, I think, the piece that had the most repeated phrases, and that was actually Liv's presentation on CBD, which repeated CBD and THC and terms like that to really beautiful poetic effect.
Awesome. Well, I will Venmo these people $10 each in the very soon. If any or all of our presenters want to pop on screen real quick, thanks, Mike, and give a wave goodbye, I guess we will do that now. Thank you all so much for joining us here. Thanks, Amy, Brian, Dianara, and Kai, Kevin, Pat, Krista, Gabe, Talia, Liv, who's over here playing with the cat. Thank you all so much for coming to this 4YI. Hopefully Rob will be back for the next one. We'll learn everything we need to learn about grains. But it was great to have you all with us, and hope the audience also enjoyed it. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Collin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Good job, everyone.
Bye.